Hello, and welcome to the Abundance Mindset podcast, where we break down financial strategies into digestible nuggets and try to help you make moves in your financial plan. And today we're going to put ourselves to the test because we're talking about non qualified stock options, NSOs.
Yep, this one's a chunky one. So we're going to talk about NSOs, or commonly just known as stock options, how they're taxed, some of the strategies that people use for them. It's going to be a really chunky episode. And for those of you who are steeped in options, this is actually the simple kind of options. Maybe we'll get into the more complex incentive stock options in a later episode. But yeah, today, just NSOs, these are the more common types of options that are granted, but they have a lot of different variables that can impact your financial plan. So we'll get into those.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about, how people might think about when to exercise, how people might think about the tax impact when they're doing this kind of selling or planning with NSOs. But, if you work with us, I am not the one talking to you about your NSOs. It's probably Ben. So you're going to hear a little bit of more of his voice today, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, I said it on LinkedIn, I think verbatim a couple weeks ago of I'm an equity comp nerd. I actually think it's super fun because, a lot of compensation is like kind of straightforward, right? It's, salaries and bonuses. But when it's equity compensation, there's a lot more complexity, but also a lot more opportunity. So I think that's super fun.
Yeah, and I should say I really like equity comp, but when it comes to actually logging into your portals and selling specific lots at specific times, you're working with Ben.
Yeah, yes, this is true. Well, hey, before we get into that, I feel like I should address the elephant in the room for anybody who's watching on YouTube, which is that we're pretty much matching. We've got new podcast outfits and actually new hats that we are pretty excited about. If you own your own business, you probably realize that like merch is a thing, right? You want to have your brand out there, you want people to see it, you want it to be cool, and I feel like we've had a few different cuts at merch over time, and this is the one we're most excited about. So we've decided to bring it into our podcasting now.
Yeah, the Abundance Club hats are iconic. And I've always struggled with style in general, but especially with work, it's like, okay, I have suits, and then I have sweatpants. And there's just not a lot of in between. And
Yeah, it's
so
like we're not gonna wear suits while we're
yeah,
podcasting. No
I'm
way.
not, no way, not in our house. I'm not wearing a suit. So this is just me, all black.
Yep.
There's I know there are other people who also are on the all black. It always matches. You don't have to think about it. You just put it on and people think you look nice.
Yep.
So all black and abundance hats.
Yeah. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you might have seen some pictures of the Abundance Club hats. But if you haven't, well, if you have, if you haven't, you can reach out, and if you reach out, I'll send you one. You just have to promise to wear it. That's all. Pinky promise. Okay.
You just have to set up a consult and then we'll send you one.
Oh, okay. Allison got a higher bar. I was just gonna send it if you said you'd wear it. Okay, well, you know who to DM then. Okay. Let's get into options, and to start off, let's run through some key definitions that we're going to use throughout.
So a stock option. A stock option is the right. It's not the obligation, but it's the right to purchase a stock at a given price. So think of it kind of like a coupon. It's the option to buy. So it's the option to buy shares at a set price, but in the future. So in that set price, it's called the strike price, right? So your strike price, you're given, these rights to buy this stock at a certain price in the future. And in the future, that stock price, it could go up or down, right? So it could either be a deal or not, right? It could be worthless. And so you have the option to, again, buy this stock at the price that you were given, that strike price, and that value in between is called the spread. And so again, the stock can go up and down, but ultimately it's the option. And I think that's a really key word when we're talking about options, because you do have a lot of options within that. The vest date is the future date that you're able to exercise your option, right? So it's once it vests, you're able to do something. Whether you do or not is going to depend on your plan and your tax strategy. But the vest date's when you can actually take action if you would like to and exercise those options, those stock options. So these options do have an expiration date. A lot of times it's 10 years, but whatever the expiration date is, you just want to be aware of that so that you do something or decide within that time frame so that they don't expire.
Yep. And then the last definition is just the type of stock option we're going to talk about today. It's technically called a non-qualified stock option. Reason for this is they are, in the IRS's eyes, non-qualified because of that, they don't qualify for special tax treatment, which other types of options or equity compensation do. So simpler, straightforward, but still a lot of strategies to be had with these. So if you haven't drank your coffee yet, this would be a good time to take a sip. We're gonna get into how NSOs or non-qualified stock options work and how the tax mechanics work. Then we'll get into some common strategies that people use when they're evaluating how to use their NSOs. So, okay, let's just go over how NSOs work. Like any type of equity comp, they're granted to you by your employer. So you're going to get, like you just mentioned, a strike price. So let's just use 100 as a value. Your employer's going to say you've got stock that you can buy at $100 at a future date. They're going to give you a vest date. Most often it's a vesting schedule, right? So oftentimes starts a year out, but your plan document governs that. Sometimes they start almost immediately or start vesting in a couple months. So on those vest dates, you then have, you begin to have the opportunity or the option to to acquire those shares at the strike price. So if the stock has gone up to 105, you still can buy them at 100. If the stock has gone down to 95, you can still buy them at 100, but you might not want to if the stock's gone down to 95. That's a bad deal for you. You just go buy them on the market if that's your thing then. So yes, when you exercise an NSO, that difference is called the spread. And the reason it has its own word is because the spread is the piece that is actually taxed, right? So again, not important if the stock's gone down. No logical person should exercise a stock or a stock option if it's actually gone down in value because you're paying more. But if it's gone up, that spread is taxed as ordinary income. And that's one of the first things that comes into light in strategies, right? So let's just say your stock has doubled to $200 and you've got 10 shares of it. You've got $2,000 worth of stock, but you only have to pay $1,000 for it. You don't just get that $1,000 of gain for free. You actually owe ordinary income tax on that. So when you exercise an option, you're going to incur ordinary income tax. And that's probably the first thing to be aware of. And usually your employer is going to withhold that ordinary income tax, but definitely check with them because you don't want to get hit with a surprise tax bill. But yes, you will owe that tax, and then depending on whether you sell them or not, if you sell right away, you just take those gains and put it in your bank account and do what you will with it. If you hang on to the stock, then that stock goes into capital gains tax, which is different than ordinary income tax, particularly if you hold on to the stock for longer than a year. So, okay, good start.
Really good start to start making planning decisions because the first decision is, well, is this stock higher than my strike price, right? Is the price of the stock higher than my strike price? And so one, it's being aware of how that stock is doing. Is it up? Is it down? And then it's, okay, how do I want this to affect me from a tax standpoint? Because if I'm just going to, and a lot of people will just, oh, well, the stock is up, so let's time to sell. And is that always the right choice? I don't know.
Yeah. We'll give some examples later of when that actually might be the wrong choice. Right. And then, I mean, a third piece of the puzzle then is what you actually want to do with that stock once you exercise it. So there's 4 different main ways you can essentially treat the stock once you exercise the option. A really common one is exercise and sell. It's also called a cashless exercise because remember, this is the option to buy the stock. So you actually have to pony up money if you're going to hang on to the stock. In a cashless exercise, you don't pony up any money because, back to your 10 shares of $100 stock, if you do a cashless exercise, the system just does it all for you, where you buy $1,000 worth of stock, if 10 shares of 100, and then you sell it right away. Maybe it's up to 1,500 total. So you've got $500 of gain. Your employer will withhold taxes from that right away if they do that. Also, any fees would be taken out. And then you're just left with the money left over. So, you get a $300, $400 in your bank account. Not a huge deal in this scenario, but if you've got, 10, 100 times that option or that amount of options, it can really start to add up. So this is like the simplest way to just do it. People should know they're, adding to their ordinary income tax bracket when they're exercising options, right? But this is just simple, and you get cash in your bank account. The other option is, or another option is to exercise and hold. Pretty simple. You pay $1,000. You also pay tax on that gain, any gain on the stock, but then you just have those shares, and then any growth in the future is taxed at capital gains rate, which, if the stock grows, can be more favorable if you hang on to it for a while. Sell to cover, we don't have to get too far into this, but this is just kind of a middle ground where you exercise the shares. A lot of employers have a system where you can say, okay, use as much shares as you need to cover the cost of buying it, but then hang on to the remainder. So if the stock has like doubled in price, you'd hang on to roughly half the stock. You'd need to sell a little bit more to cover taxes and whatnot. But you can do it where it's like, oh, I don't have to actually pay money out of my bank account, but I can still hang on to some stock if it's gone up a lot. This makes most sense if you do have highly appreciated stock, but you don't necessarily have the cash on hand where you want to pay a huge tax bill or a large amount of cash just to get the stock. And then the fourth option, which is also can be a really reasonable option, is to wait to exercise. So you don't have to exercise an option at a given time in a given year when it vests. You just have to be mindful that if you do nothing for typically 10 years, unless specified otherwise, that option just disappears. So there's opportunity cost of waiting, but you don't ever have to do anything with your stock options.
There's so much wrapped into this: opportunity costs, the stock price, the market, the vest date, the tax implications. There's so much to track. And I think, and again, this is just one piece in a plan. And so I think it's something where, even as we're going through this, I'm realizing this is pretty heady. And this is just a piece of a financial plan. It just has a lot of ripple effect. It has a lot of impacts when you're looking at your overall plan, if you have these.
Yep. Yeah, so if your eyes glazed over, or you got a little bit overwhelmed wondering whether you should be selling your stock options, a couple resources. We do have a free equity comp guide that we made that basically has a cheat sheet for these types of stock options as well as other types of stock options, actually 12 different types of equity comps. So we'll put that link in the show notes, but if you sign up for our newsletter, you get a free copy of that, and that's just a helpful cheat sheet of common strategies and taxes if you're just trying to get grounded in what you've received from your employer. We also have a little equity comp quiz, which you can take and get a free strategy assessment, which just kind of goes through some of the things that are more personalized to you. So it's kind of like the next step toward personalization. It's not a financial plan, but we'll link that as well. So just like a couple tools where you can educate yourself and then also get a little bit more personalized in terms of, what your equity comp is doing or could be doing for you.
So there's a few variables you have to consider when you're deciding what to do with your options. The first that comes to mind is how you feel about your company, where you think the stock price is going, and just having a conversation with your financial planner about that. And even if you're going to change jobs, right? Especially, depending on if there's an income change in that job change. But even changing jobs for sake of using your options, if that's the wise thing to do. With the expiration date, right? And then, of course, things like cash flow and your tax status in your current year and future year expectations, as well as just concentration in that company stock. So there's all these different variables that you start to weigh and run a few projections when you ground yourself and decide, when looking at this NSO, am I going to exercise options? Am I going to sell? Am I, what am I going to do with this piece of the plan?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's, extra fun or interesting about options is, well, a couple of things. One, flexibility. You've got a lot of flexibility, and unless we meet you and you're about to have options expire, you've got typically years to decide the most opportune time to sell. And of course, we don't know where your company's stock is going to be at that time. So that's a huge variable that we can't plan for, but we can plan around.
Well, and I think that's a great point because just like I said earlier, there's a lot of options and options, right?
Hmm.
Versus something like, so another form of equity comp, RSUs. RSUs just happen to you. You get them and boom, ordinary income.
Right.
Whereas NSOs or non-qualified stock options or stock options for example, there is optionality, there is choice, and there is so then more planning and more variables for you to weigh throughout the year and in coming years.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to talk about a few strategies that people might employ. Know that none of these, though, can be like considered in a vacuum. So these all involve other pieces of your financial plan in helping you to determine whether it's right for you. So first one, you mentioned a little bit, but being mindful of both your current year expected income as well as future years of expected income. Let's give an example that feels maybe a little straightforward, but say you're married and you and your spouse are both working. Next year, your spouse is planning to go to grad school. So your ordinary income is actually going to crater as a couple or, get halved or what have you, whatever that split is. You might want to think about waiting to exercise your options and possibly exercising a bulk of options available to you while your spouse is in grad school. Again, we can't predict whether your company's stock is going to be, or the price, whether it's going to be up or down at that time. But from an ordinary income tax planning perspective, you are advantaged because you'll pay less tax if you're in lower brackets to wait and exercise them in a lower income year. So, that one's straightforward, but there can be a lot of different variables that could impact this. Maybe you inherited an IRA, right? And you're getting payments from that for a couple of years or a few years still.
Right. And that's always the struggle with these podcasts is there's such a ripple effect. There's so many different ways that this could affect, if you're trying to increase your income, decrease your income strategically in a year because okay, let's say there is the, inherited IRA situation or just your income spikes for example, or you get a huge bonus or a different form of
Hmm.
equity comp. Anyhow, your income goes up. Okay, well, maybe we're waiting or we're trying to push our NSOs into the long-term capital gains bracket and, not affect our ordinary income. And maybe we even switch your 401k to pre-tax for that year. So it's just this is what we mean by like this is grounded within a plan, but we're again just trying to stick on this topic of stock
Right.
options.
Yeah. And there may have been reasons, this year we weren't sure if the current ordinary income tax brackets were going to remain the same or if they were going to revert to higher levels in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, so they did stay the same. But had they not, we may have been then having conversations with people. Like that would be a variable to say, hey, you might want to exercise, like front load your exercises into a year where the tax bracket is lower, or excuse me, the effective tax rates are lower within your tax bracket.
Right.
So yeah, what's great about options is that you have options, but there's a lot of things that could impact it, right? So you want to, like, generally you want to maximize the most advantageous tax brackets. Like that the crux, that's really what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just a lot of things that can impact your tax bracket. And this is one of the variables that you actually have a good amount of control over. But again, what you don't have control over is how much your company stock is worth when you exercise. So that's a huge variable.
Right. Market timing aside, right? It's just you might want to push your NSO into that long-term capital gains bracket from an in-year tax status or future year tax status analysis. So that's what we're talking about. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's all stock price and market timing aside.
Yep. Yeah. And so, you know, whether you decide to push your options as far out as possible or exercise them sooner, that also is a question that's kind of steeped in like whether you want to take more risk in your company or not. For some people, hanging on to their stock options for 6, 7, 8, 9 years may actually make sense. If you're steady at the company, you believe the stock could go up a lot, but you don't have either the risk tolerance or the desire to hang on to a lot of company stock. Hanging on to an option is like a pretty low risk way to possibly benefit a lot from your stock, your company appreciating, right? So back to that $100 example, 2016, say you got, a stock option with a strike price of $100 and you don't want to hang on to a bunch of company stock because you're just like, a little bit averse to concentration, which is wise. We don't want to be too concentrated, but you also felt like your company could do well and you want to stay there for a while. That stock, let's just say your company stock is worth 300 or 400 in 2025. Now you might want to exercise, and you never took risk in that stock. You never had it in your net worth and it's going up and down, but you could just get a nice bonus, and it would be taxed as ordinary income, right? Because you waited to exercise. But if you got a bunch of shares of that, that could actually be a really big bonus that you get without having to take risk. So again, kind of depends where you're taking risk across your portfolio, but options give you a lower risk way to possibly participate in your company's growth.
Totally. You can hold a coupon, as long as it doesn't expire.
Yep. Yep. 100%. On the flip side, and I'd say this one applies more frequently in cases where you're working for a smaller company, the stock is super cheap, you think it's kind of undervalued, you guys might be in a high growth situation, you might want to use your options and acquire the stock kind of ASAP when it vests, if you're planning on holding on to it, because like you've said a couple times, once you own the stock, it's any future growth or movement of the stock is taxed at capital gains rate. So if you hold it for more than a year, in most circumstances, your long-term capital gains tax rate is going to be lower than ordinary income. So if you exercise the stock and hold on to it, you can get more favorable tax treatment. If you decide not to exercise it and it grew a lot and then you exercised it, great, you get money, but it's all taxed at ordinary income. So it's all a kind of a tax game, only as a game with high stakes. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but it's all about controlling your income over time with what you have available to you.
There's a lot of people that are really thankful that you see it that way. Because for a lot of people, it's just a headache and they don't even look at it or try to do anything with their stock options.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So
They just ask their coworker and they do what they're doing. And that person asks their uncle who, it's so.
yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because I think for a lot of people that we've talked to that have stock options, a lot of them just do that cashless exercise and just like take, some money in the bank. And that's not bad. Like it's great to make money, but as you can see, if you've stuck with us here, like there's a lot more potential efficiency that you could get out of these. Like these can actually be a huge lever in your financial plan, as opposed to just something you do when you remember, just kind of click in. Okay, yeah, I got a little bonus coming to me from my company stock that's gone up. It's like, well, wait a second, we actually could maximize tax brackets. We can modulate income up and down based on this equity compensation that you've been given by your employer. So just like so much more flexibility than some of the other things like RSUs, another common form of equity comp.
Yeah, it's complex, so some people fear it, but really it can be viewed and used as a tool. So in summary, non-qualified stock options give you the option, right? Options give you options, not the obligation, but the option to buy a stock at a set price or the strike price, right? And with that, when you decide to exercise the option and buy the company stock, you can either cash this out right away or use it as a mechanism to buy and hold more company stock. So there's decisions afterward.
Yep. If your goal is to exercise and hold because you're really bullish and you think the company stock is going to do amazing and you're okay with some concentration, then usually exercising earlier is better. If your goal is to cash out the options and you don't want to take a lot of risk on the company stock, then waiting could be a really good option. In both cases, you want to make sure that you're not accidentally tripping any tax wires for your financial plan when you use these. So, okay, so a lot of strategies here. Hopefully, you've heard us hedge enough to know that really there's no way to know precisely what's most optimal for you with your options without doing a full financial plan, because we are looking at multiple years of tax projections, looking at other income impacts in your life. And so while we can educate on this type of equity compensation, we certainly can't advise. So hopefully this has been illuminated in the different ways that you might use your equity compensation. But yeah, know that there's a lot of variables at play.
Yes, this is a small piece within a large plan, and I sound like a broken record, but use this as a tool within the overall tool belt and the overall strategy of how you're going to build the house, right? So there is this big blueprint, this financial plan where, ultimately we're just talking again about a tool for building the house. And and you want it all to work together. And so if this resonates and this tool is relevant for you, or if it's not, you just know you need to do some planning, then go to our website and book a consult, because it's really about the overall household strategy for your life, for your family, and within a larger financial plan.
Yeah. Make sure you know your options for your options.